Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, popularly known as Babasaheb, was an Indian jurist, economist, politician and social reformer who inspired the Dalit Buddhist movement and campaigned against social discrimination against untouchables, while also supporting the rights of women and labour. He was independent India's first law minister and the principal architect of the Constitution of India. Ambedkar was a prolific student, earning doctorates in economics from both Columbia University and the London School of Economics, and gained a reputation as a scholar for his research in law, economics and political science. In his early career he was an economist, professor and lawyer. His later life was marked by his political activities. He became involved in campaigning and negotiations for India's independence, publishing journals advocating political rights and social freedom for Dalits, and contributing significantly to the establishment of the State of India. In 1956 he converted to Buddhism, initiating mass conversions of Dalits. In 1990, the Bharat Ratna, India's highest civilian award, was posthumously conferred upon Ambedkar. Ambedkar's legacy includes numerous memorials and depictions in popular culture. Early life. Ambedkar was born on 14 April 1891 in the town and military cantonment of Mhow in the central provinces. He was the 14th and last child of Ramji Malaji Sakpal, an army officer who held the rank of subedar, and Bhimrao Ambedkar Sakpal. His family was of Marathi background from the town of Ambavad in Ratnagiri district of modern-day Maharashtra. Ambedkar was born into a poor low-middle caste who were treated as untouchables and subjected to socio-economic discrimination. Ambedkar's ancestors had long worked for the army of the British East India Company, and his father served in the British Indian Army at the Mhow cantonment. Although they attended school, Ambedkar and other untouchable children were segregated and given little attention or help by teachers. They were not allowed to sit inside the class. When they needed to drink water, someone from a higher caste had to pour that water from a height, as they were not allowed to touch either the water or the vessel that contained it. This task was usually performed for the young Ambedkar by the school peon, and if the peon was not available, then he had to go without water, the situation he later in his writings described as "no peon, no water." He was required to sit on a gunny sack which he had to take home with him. Ramji Sakpal retired in 1894 and the family moved to Satara 2 years later. Shortly after the move, Ambedkar's mother died. The children were cared for by the paternal aunt, and lived in difficult circumstances. 3 sons, Balaram, Anandreo and Bhimrao, and 2 daughters, Manjula and Tulasa. If the Ambedkars would go on to survive them. Of his brothers and sisters, only Ambedkar passed his examinations and graduated to high school. His original surname Ambedkar comes from his native village Ambavad in Ratnagiri district. His teacher, Mahadev Ambedkar, who was fond of him, changed his surname from Ambedkar to his own surname, Ambedkar, in school records. Education. Post-secondary education. In 1897, Ambedkar's family moved to Bombay, where Ambedkar became the only untouchable enrolled at Elphinstone High School. In 1906, when he was about 15 years old, his marriage to a 9-year-old girl, Ramabai, was arranged. Undergraduate studies at the University of Bombay. In 1907, he passed his matriculation examination, and in the following year he entered Elphinstone College, which was affiliated to the University of Bombay, becoming the first untouchable to do so. This success evoked much much celebration among Untouchables, and after a public ceremony, he was presented with a biography of the Buddha by Dada Kailaskar, the author and a family friend. By 1912, he obtained his degree in economics and political science from Bombay University, and prepared to take up employment with the Baroda state government. His wife, by then 15 years old, had just moved his young family and started work, when he had to quickly return to Mumbai to see his ailing father, who died on the 2nd of February 1913. Postgraduate studies at Columbia University. In 1913, Ambedkar moved to the United States at the age of 22. He had been awarded a Baroda State Scholarship of £11.50 per month for 3 years under a scheme established by Sajirao Gakwad III that was designed to provide opportunities for postgraduate education at Columbia University in New York City. Soon after arriving there, he settled in rooms at Livingston Hall with Naval Bathina, a Parsi who was to be a lifelong friend. He passed his MA exam in June 1915, majoring in economics and other subjects of sociology, history, philosophy and anthropology. He presented a thesis, Ancient Indian Commerce. Ambedkar was influenced by John Dewey and his work on democracy. In 1916 he completed his second thesis, National Dividend of India, a historic and analytical study, for another M.A., and finally he received his Ph.D. in economics in 1927 for his third thesis, after he left for London. On the 9th of May, he read his paper Castes in India, The Mechanism, Genesis and Development, before a seminar conducted by the anthropologist Alexander Goldenweiser. Postgraduate studies at the London School of Economics. In October 1916, he enrolled for the bar course at Gray's Inn, and at the same time enrolled at the London School of Economics, where he started working on a doctoral thesis. In June 1917, he returned to India because his scholarship from Baroda ended. His book collection was dispatched on different ship from the one he was on, and that ship was torpedoed and sunk by a German submarine. He got permission to return to London to submit his thesis within 4 years. He returned at the first opportunity, and completed a master's degree in 1921. His thesis was on the problem of the rupee, its origin and its solution. In 1923, he completed a D.Sc. in economics, and the same year he was called to the bar by Gray's Inn. His third and fourth doctorates were conferred honoris causa. Opposition to Aryan invasion theory. Ambedkar viewed the Shudras as Aryan and adamantly rejected the Aryan invasion theory, describing it as so absurd that it ought to have been dead long ago. In his 1946 book Who Were the Shudras, Ambedkar viewed Shudras as originally being part of the Kshatriya Varna in the Indo-Aryan society, but became socially degraded after they inflicted many tyrannies on Brahmins. According to Arvind Sharma, Ambedkar noticed certain flaws in the Aryan invasion theory that were later acknowledged by Western scholarship. For example, scholars now acknowledge Anus in Rigveda 5.29.1 refers to speech rather than the shape of the nose. Ambedkar anticipated this modern view by stating, the term Anasa occurs in Rigveda v29.10. What does the word mean? There are two interpretations. One is by Professor Max Muller, the other is by Sayanacharya. According to Professor Max Muller, it means one without nose, or one with a flat nose, and has as such been relied upon as a piece of evidence in support of the view that the Aryans were a separate race from the Dasyas. Sayanacharya says that it means mouthless, i.e., devoid of good speech. This difference of meaning is due to difference in the correct reading of the word Nasa. Sayanacharya reads it as an Asha, while Professor Max Muller reads it as a Nasa. as read by Professor Max Muller. It means without nose. Question is, which of the two readings is the correct one? There is no reason to hold that Sayana's reading is wrong. On the other hand, there is everything to suggest that it is right. In the first place, it does not make nonsense of the word. Secondly, as there is no other place where the Daseis are described as noseless, there is no reason why the word should be read in such a manner as to give it an altogether new sense. It is only fair to read it as a synonym of Muradavak. There is therefore no evidence in support of the conclusion that the Daseis belonged to a different race. Ambedkar disputed various hypotheses of the Aryan homeland being outside India, and concluded the Aryan homeland was India itself. According to Ambedkar, the Rig Veda says Aryans, Dasa and Daseis were competing religious groups, not different peoples. Opposition to untouchability. As Ambedkar was educated by the princely state of Baroda, he was bound to serve it. He was appointed military secretary to the Gaikwad but had to quit in a short time. He described the incident in his autobiography, Waiting for a Visa. Thereafter, he tried to find ways to make a living for his growing family. He worked as a private tutor, as an accountant, and established an investment consulting business. But it failed when his clients learned that he was an untouchable. In 1918, he became professor of political economy in the Sydenham College of Commerce and Economics in Mumbai. Although he was successful with the students, other professors objected to his sharing a drinking water jug with them. Ambedkar had been invited to testify before the Southborough Committee, which was preparing the Government of India Act 1919. At this hearing, Ambedkar argued for creating separate electorates and reservations for untouchables and other religious communities. In 1920, he began the publication of the weekly Muknaik in Mumbai with the help of Shahaji II, Maharaja of Kolhapur. Ambedkar went on to work as a legal professional. In 1926, he successfully defended 3 non-Brahmin leaders who had accused the Brahmin community of ruining India and were then subsequently sued for libel. Dhananjay notes that the victory was resounding, both socially and individually, for the clients and the doctor. Protests. While practicing law in the Bombay High Court, he tried to promote education to untouchables and uplift them. His first organized attempt was his establishment of the Central Institution Barishkratatarini Sabha, intended to promote education and socio-economic improvement, as well as the welfare of outcasts, at the time referred to as depressed classes. For the defense of Dalit rights, he started many periodicals like Muknaik, Ishkrat Bharat, and Equality Janta. He was appointed to the Bombay Presidency Committee to work with the All-European Simon Commission in 1925. This commission had sparked great protests across India, and while its report was ignored by most Indians, Ambedkar himself wrote a separate set of recommendations for the future Constitution of India. By 1927, Ambedkar had decided to launch active movements against untouchability. He began with public movements and marches to open up public drinking water resources. He also began a struggle for the right to enter Hindu temples. He led a satyagraha in Mahad to fight for the right of the untouchable community to draw water from the main water tank of the town. In a conference in late 1927, Ambedkar publicly condemned the classic Hindu text, the Manusmriti, for ideologically justifying caste discrimination and untouchability, and he ceremonially burned copies of the ancient text. On the 25th of December 1927, he led thousands of followers to burn copies of Manusmriti. Thus annually the 25th of December is celebrated as Manusmriti Divan Din by Ambedkarites and Dalits. In 1930, Ambedkar launched Kalaram Temple movement after 3 months of preparation. About 15,000 volunteers assembled at Mount Kalaram Temple Satyagraha, making one of the greatest processions of Nashik. The procession was headed by a military band. A batch of scouts, women and men, walked in discipline, order and determination to see the god for the first time. When they reached a gate, the gates were closed by Brahmin authorities. Pune Pact. In 1932, British announced the formation of a separate electorate for depressed classes in the communal ward. Gandhi fiercely opposed the separate electorate for untouchables, saying he feared that such an arrangement would divide the Hindu community. Gandhi protested by fasting while imprisoned in the Uwada Central Jail of Pune. Following the fast, Congress politicians and activists such as Madan Mohan Malaviya and Pulwanka Balu organized joint meetings with Ambedkar and his supporters at Uwada. On the 25th of September 1932, the agreement known as Pune Pact was signed between Ambedkar and Madan Mohan Malaviya. The agreement gave reserved seats for the depressed classes in the provisional legislatures within the general electorate. Due to the pact, the depressed class received 148 seats in the legislature, instead of the 71 as allocated in the communal award earlier proposed by the British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald. The text uses the term depressed classes to denote untouchables among Hindus who were later called scheduled castes and scheduled tribes under India Act 1935, and the later Indian Constitution of 1950. Political career. In 1935, Ambedkar was appointed principal of the Government Law College, Bombay, a position he held for 2 years. He also served as the chairman of governing body of Ramjas College, University of Delhi, after the death of its founder Sri Rakadnath. Settling in Bombay, Ambedkar oversaw the construction of a house and stocked his personal library with more than 50,000 books. His wife Ramabai died after a long illness the same year. It had been her long-standing wish to go on a pilgrimage to Pandharpur, but Ambedkar had refused to let her go, telling her that he would create a new Pandharpur for her instead of Hinduism's Pandharpur, which treated them as untouchables. At the Eola Conversion Conference on the 13th of October in Nashik, Ambedkar announced his intention to convert to a different religion and exhorted his followers to leave Hinduism. He would repeat his message at many public meetings across India. In 1936, Ambedkar founded the Independent Labour Party, which contested the 1937 Bombay election to the Central Legislative Assembly for the 13 reserved and 4 general seats, and secured 11 and 3 seats respectively. Ambedkar published his book Annihilation of Caste on 15 May 1936. It strongly criticized Hindu Orthodox religious leaders and the caste system in general, and included a rebuke of Gandhi on the subject. Later, in a 1955 BBC interview, he accused Gandhi of writing in opposition of the caste system in English-language papers while writing in support of it in Gujarati-language papers. Ambedkar served on the Defence Advisory Committee and the Viceroy's Executive Council as Minister for Labour. In his work Who Were the Shudras?, Ambedkar tried to explain the formation of untouchables. He saw Shudras and ATI Shudras, who formed the lowest caste in the ritual hierarchy of the caste system, as separate from untouchables. Ambedkar oversaw the transformation of his political party into the Scheduled Castes Federation, although it performed poorly in the 1946 elections for Constituent Assembly of India. Later he was elected into the Constituent Assembly of Bengal, where Muslim League was in power. Ambedkar contested in the Bombay North First Indian general election of 1952. but lost to his former assistant and Congress Party candidate Narayan Ambedkar. Ambedkar became a member of Rajya Sabha, probably an appointed member. He tried to enter Lok Sabha again in the by-election of 1954 from Bandara, but he placed third. By the time of the second general election in 1957, Ambedkar had died. Ambedkar also criticized Islamic practice in South Asia. While justifying the partition of India, he condemned child marriage and the mistreatment of women in Muslim society. No words can adequately express the great and many evils of polygamy and concubinage, and especially as a source of misery to a Muslim woman. Take the caste system. Everybody infers that Islam must be free from slavery and caste. Much of its support was derived from Islam and Islamic countries. While the prescriptions by the Prophet regarding the just and humane treatment of slaves contained in the Quran are praiseworthy, there is nothing whatever in Islam that lends support to the abolition of this curse. But if slavery has gone, caste among Muslims has remained. Drafting India's constitution. Upon India's independence on 15 August 1947, the new Congress-led government invited Ambedkar to serve as the nation's first law minister, which he accepted. On 29 August, he was appointed chairman of the Constitution Drafting Committee, and was appointed by the Assembly to write India's new constitution. Granville Austin described the Indian constitution drafted by Ambedkar as first and foremost a social document. The majority of India's constitutional provisions are either directly arrived at furthering the aim of social revolution or attempt to foster this revolution by establishing conditions necessary for its achievement. The text prepared by Ambedkar provided constitutional guarantees and protections for a wide range of civil liberties for individual citizens, including freedom of religion, the abolition of untouchability, and the outlawing of all forms of discrimination. Ambedkar argued for extensive economic and social rights for women, and won the Assembly's support for introducing a system of reservations of jobs in the civil services, schools and colleges for members of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and other backward class, a system akin to affirmative action. India's lawmakers hoped to eradicate the socio-economic inequalities and lack of opportunities for India's depressed classes through these measures. The constitution was adopted on 26 November 1949 by the Constituent Assembly. During the debates in the Constituent Assembly, Ambedkar demonstrated his will to reform Indian society by recommending the adoption of a uniform civil code. Ambedkar resigned from the cabinet in 1951, when Parliament stalled his draft of the Hindu Code Bill, which sought to enshrine gender equality in the laws of inheritance and marriage. Ambedkar independently contested an election in 1952 to the lower house of Parliament, the Lok Sabha, but was defeated in the Bombay constituency by little-known Narayan Ambedkar, who polled 138,137 votes compared to Ambedkar's 123,576. He was appointed to the upper house of Parliament, the Rajya Sabha, in March 1952 and would remain as member till death. Ambedkar opposed Article 370 of the Constitution of India, which granted a special status to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and which was included against his wishes. Balraj Madhok reportedly said, Ambedkar had clearly told S.K. Abdullah, "You wish India should protect your borders. She should build roads in your area. She should supply you food grains. And Kashmir should get equal status as India. But Government of India should have only limited powers and Indian people should have no rights in Kashmir. To give consent to this proposal would be a treacherous thing against the interests of India, and I, as the Law Minister of India, will never do it." Quote. Then S.K. Abdullah approached Nehru, who directed him to Gopal Swami Iyengar, who in turn approached Sardar Patel, saying Nehru had promised S.K. Abdullah the special status. Patel got the article passed while Nehru was on a foreign tour. On the day the article came up for discussion, Ambedkar did not reply to questions on it but did participate on other articles. All arguments were done by Krishnaswamy Iyengar. Economic planning. Ambedkar was the first Indian to pursue a doctorate in economics abroad. He argued that industrialization and agricultural growth could enhance the Indian economy. He stressed investment in agriculture as the primary industry of India. According to Sharad Pawar, Ambedkar's vision helped the government to achieve its food security goal. Ambedkar advocated national economic and social development, stressing education, public hygiene, community health, residential facilities as the basic amenities. His DSc thesis, The Problem of the Rupee, Its Origin and Solution, examines the causes for the rupee's fall in value. He proved the importance of price stability over exchange stability. He analyzed the silver and gold exchange rates and their effect on the economy, and found the reasons for the failure of British India's public treasury. He calculated the loss of development caused by British rule. In 1951, Ambedkar established the Finance Commission of India. He opposed income tax for low-income groups. He contributed in land revenue tax and excise duty policies to stabilize the economy. He played an important role in land reform and the state economic development. According to him, the caste system divided laborers and impeded economic progress. He emphasized a free economy with a stable rupee, which India has adopted recently. He advocated birth control to develop the Indian economy, and this has been adopted by Indian government as national policy for family planning. He emphasized equal rights for women for economic development. He laid the foundation of industrial relations after Indian independence. Reserve Bank of India. Ambedkar was trained as an economist, and was a professional economist until 1921, when he became a political leader. He wrote 3 scholarly books on economics, administration and finance of the East India Company, The Evolution of Provincial Finance in British India, The Problem of the Rupee, Its Origin and Its Solution. The Reserve Bank of India was based on the ideas that Ambedkar presented to the Hilton Young Commission. Second marriage. Ambedkar's first wife Ramabai died in 1935 after a long illness. After completing the draft of India's constitution in the late 1940s, he suffered from lack of sleep, had neuropathic pain in his legs, and was taking insulin and homeopathic medicines. He went to Bombay for treatment, and met Sharada Kabir, a Brahmin, whom he married on 15 April 1948, at his home in New Delhi. Doctors recommended a companion who was a good cook and had medical knowledge to care for him. She adopted the name Savita Ambedkar and cared for him the rest of his life. Conversion to Buddhism. Ambedkar considered converting to Sikhism, which encouraged opposition to oppression and so appealed to leaders of scheduled castes. But after meeting with Sikh leaders, he concluded that he might get second-rate Sikh status, as described by scholar Stephen P. Cohen. Instead, he studied Buddhism all his life. Around 1950, he devoted his attention to Buddhism and traveled to Ceylon to attend a meeting of the World Fellowship of Buddhists. While dedicating a new Buddhist vihara near Pune, Ambedkar announced he was writing a book on Buddhism, and that when it was finished, he would formally convert to Buddhism. He twice visited visited Burma in 1954, the second time to attend the third conference of the World Fellowship of Buddhists in Rangoon. In 1955, he founded the Bharatiya Bodha Mahasabha, or the Buddhist Society of India. He completed his final work, The Buddha and His Dhamma, in 1956, which was published posthumously. After meetings with the Sri Lankan Buddhist monk Hamalala Sadatissa, Ambedkar organized a formal public ceremony for himself and his supporters in Nagpur on 14 October 1956. Accepting the 3 refuges and 5 precepts from a Buddhist monk in the traditional manner, Ambedkar completed his own conversion, along with his wife. He then proceeded to convert them 500,000 of his supporters who were gathered around him. He prescribed the 22 vows for these converts after the 3 jewels and 5 precepts. He then traveled to Kathmandu, Nepal to attend the 4th World Buddhist Conference. His work on the Buddha, Karl Marx, and revolution and counter-revolution in ancient India remained incomplete.